In 5, 4.
Wrong one.
Old school. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Omnic Lab. This is episode 79, and this week we're going to be talking about proper hero framing and positioning. I'm your host, Rob May, coming in from the Rising Sun after midnight, coming in hot, and joining me, as always, is my co-host and yours, Andres Gomez from Georgia. What's up, Andres? How's your morning doing?
What's up, Rob? Much better today. I am not super sick as I was last week. I know I wasn't even able to make it to the show, so I'm super happy to be back. And today we have a little strategy talk, my favorite, so I'm ready for it.
Right on. And as you guys can tell, we haven't had much of the special top 500 type guests coming into the show. We've been working on trying to get something put together for a Widow show and been coming up a little short, but we're going to keep pressing on. I think I've got a couple options. I got a couple folks I actually got pretty close to getting on this week, so we'll see what we can do for next week or the prior. But as you know, with holidays and OWL teams traveling, it's a lot harder to get people to come on than I initially had thought. So let's keep moving. I think that the first thing that a lot of people are wondering is how the game night went. So Andres, why don't you talk a little bit about your group, and then I'll talk about mine.
Sure. Game night was super fun. I was able to be there for about like 2 hours. It was one of the biggest game nights that we've had so far. It was like 60 people. We had like 3 lobbies going on at one point, and every lobby had like rotating people too. It was really fun.
PC only too.
Yeah, it was PC only. Like, yeah, this is not even counting some of the folks that got together for the console side. So yeah, I was floored by the amount of people. I think that making it on Black Friday had a lot to do with it too. Everybody was maybe just at home, hanging out with their family, got sneaked out for a little bit, play some Overwatch, or honestly, just stayed home and played some video games the entire day. I know that's what my roommate did. It seemed like he had a great time.
Yeah, our groups were split, so I didn't get a chance to play much with Andres and everybody in the community, but we tried to make ourselves separate so that we could, maximize pleasing the community, make sure we play with a little bit of our patrons here and there that came in, and we're able to get a couple people that kind of left and joined in and out. So it was really good. Game night had a lot of all kinds of ranges of skill, from bronze to grandmaster. It was a lot of fun, and especially since Moira's in the mix now, it makes the games very interesting. Lots of smack talking with all the new Moira mains out there. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a Moira in almost every one of my games, but I'm not complaining. It was really fun playing with her, and it was fun playing with her in a friendly environment because you could actually do cool stuff and coordinate certain things that sometimes you can't do, in competitive and stuff.
Right. So this week, I wanted to highlight what we got going on with the Omnic Meta, our partner of the show. And right now, we still have the PC meta report from November 10th. I know I talked with Switch, and he's still cooking something up. He said that the reason that there's been such a delay with Moira was because she was only released on PTR and was not able to get official competitive stats. So I believe in the next week you guys are going to want to look to making sure you check that out for the Moira analysis. The last thing that we have was on November 20th. There is a little bit of the analysis for Ana, which patch 1.17 is the title is Welcome Back, Grandma. So basically it is a Ana versus Mercy stat analysis of both usage, pick rate, damage per game, resurrections in a match, kind of like seeing the drop in Mercy, and then also what the win rate changes have become. And the win rate changes haven't changed much aside from Mercy relatively going up a little bit in win rates than Master Grandmaster, and Ana's win rates have gone up by about 3 to 4% on average. So it's still a good time to play Ana. It looks like they're just able to play now. The good ones are kind of coming out of hiding now that Mercy isn't such a must pick, so you're not getting the bad ones as often. But yeah, it's some good analysis for you guys if you're interested in learning more about why Ana is becoming more of a pick rate. Moving right along, we had the Overwatch free weekend was this last weekend, and I didn't get to encounter any of them because I wasn't playing in quick play, but hopefully you guys were able to welcome some of the new folks into the game. But Andres, why don't you,
I'm sure some of them giving a really warm welcome into the world of
yeah.
Overwatch.
Yeah, for sure.
With a
So Andres,
tracer
how
pistol to the face.
Your placements gone? I was gonna ask.
Placements are out of the way. This season has been a little slow for me, honestly. I've been a little rusty since I came back from BlizzCon, and I haven't had like a really good chunk of time to just sit down and grind like the entire week. I've been also distracted by a bunch of different things. I was sick for a little bit. I was trying out Destiny for a little bit. So my time has been cut a little bit short. I think I'm hovering around 3,200 right now. I placed at like 3,400 and then had some really rough games and fell down a little bit. So I'm back into the diamond world. Hopefully I can grind myself back up. I've been playing a ton of Winston and a ton of Lucio. I've been flexing a lot this season. And I think that also has to do, or that's also the reason why I've been like dropping down a little bit. I'm not playing my super comfort heroes. I've been trying to branching out a little bit more into different roles, just filling in as needed. I've been playing a lot of Mercy actually. She's in one of my top played this season, which is like the first time ever in all of my seasons. So yeah, I'm just trying to branch out a little bit. I'm not trying to worry too much about my rank. At this point, I'm just trying to learn other roles and improve myself as a player.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Although I haven't finished my placements yet, of the same reasons of you. I got back from BlizzCon, jumped full tilt into playing a lot more Destiny. I got in a couple raids. Honestly, I did one that lasted way too long with Andres right after we stopped playing
way
the game
too
night.
long.
We actually left to go do that. Wow. That's partially the reason that we had to push the show back a little bit, because we were up really late on stateside and into the late day for me, and that raid was brutal. But we won't set up a Destiny Jarda for us to kind of pickpocket and talk about here, because Overwatch for me has been really great. I jumped in with the Moira right before Moira was released, but after on a patch, and I think I have about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 of my games done. And I've kind of gone even so far. I think it's like 2 wins, 2 losses or something like that, or 3 wins, 3 losses. And I've been playing everything, Andres. I've played Zenyatta. I've played Mercy. I've played Pharah. I've played Soldier. I've literally just like jumped on almost any hero that's not a tank.
Nice.
At some point. And honestly, my Pharah isn't that great, but in the situation where I picked it, it was definitively one of the 2 hero swaps that our team made in order to win the game. So that was really, really cool to kind of be a part of a countering strategy.
Yeah, you clutch it.
The games have not been that great, but I do know that when I'm playing Zenyatta, I feel right at home. And when we transitioned to the game night, it felt like I was in comp, like with our people. So it was really, really fun to play a lot of Moira and get some compliments there. And Shock telling me that I'm playing it pretty well. And Shock is playing her in Grandmasters, and we're doing a lot of the similar things. The thing right now that we've been finding out is you want to try with Moira for whatever reason. She doesn't charge her ult in the kind of the same way. You kind of have to weave both healing and damage to get the ultimate. And man, let me tell you, the ult charge, like once you get the ultimate charge rate at a consistent rate, like you do with Ana, like getting it to that point where you're basically able to have your ultimate almost every other fight is really, really powerful. So I've been trying to like master survival and getting the ultimate faster with her.
Yeah,
But
I noticed
can,
that during the game night, the way like a lot of you guys were playing Moira was really like sneaky. It was really hard to like focus on her because the second you would focus on her, she would just vanish and like reappear somewhere else. And she's very small framed, so as long as you're like behind like a tank or something, you're usually in the clear. So it was like it was so annoying trying to play against some of the Moiras because it was like you were about to kill her, or as soon as you kind of like damage her, poof, gone in a little cloud of smoke. Like, Moira, where are you? She's a lot squishier than I initially thought. Like now that people are kind of like getting the hang of her.
Yep. I think it's time for us to go into the email, which is the springboard for which we got the topic of the show. So, Andres, take us away, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a really, really good email. Let me pull it up over here. I don't know where it went. Here we go. Oh, I wish I had the name of the person. I copied the email over here.
I'll pull it up.
Oh, yeah,
you read
you
it
pull
and
it up.
I'll sign the bow.
We got this email this week, and I thought it was a great email. Everything from it, I love. It's about strategy, it's about improvement, and it's about welcoming new players. So I thought it was a great idea to add it to the show and have a little discussion around it because I think we've all gone through this if you've been playing Overwatch for a little bit. And this one come from Neil S. He says, "Hi guys, great job on the podcast. I hope to join the game night someday. In the latest podcast, Rob mentioned a hypothetical situation when he made an error of contesting the payload recklessly instead of taking his time. This got me wondering in what other situations we could identify to help me target improvements in our gameplay. NFL coach Bill Belichick is well known for talking about situations, recognize the situations, and win the situations to win the game. I think a breakdown of recognizing small situations in the game would be great podcast content. And you are right, my man. Perhaps it is just an additional question to ask a top 500 player. You guys have, one of you guys have. Those are my favorite podcasts, by the way. Those are my favorite too. A lot of strategy discussed in those. Team situation, as thing you guys have talked about, include setting up a defense, poke phase, engaging, disengaging, the hopeless fight, cleaning up after you won the fight, planning for the next fight. And I think, we've touched a little bit on these points in previous episodes. And he says, I don't get to play the game so much, so I'd love to hear what situations you guys identify to help illustrate what I'm talking about. Here are a few very basic situations that took me a while to recognize. I'm going to run through these because I think these are all very valid, and these are all kind of like concepts that it takes a minute to grasp. You have to play the game for a little bit to kind of like start getting why these are good, because not all of them are super obvious in the beginning. The first one he mentions is good versus bad trickling. On King of the Hill maps, people say don't trickle in, but it is important to recognize on Koth, if you have the point, it can be worth contesting a losing battle longer to gain more capture percentage. If you don't have the point, then running back to die is just feeding. Simple idea, but can look the same if you don't recognize the situation. And I think this is a really valid recognition. Do you want to say something about this one, Rob?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Sorry, I'm like at midnight, the midnight munchies. But this is something that has definitely come up in our game nights where we mix up, the skill brackets where people are like, don't go in. And, you're holding the point and you're losing the point, but you're at about 65%. And I'm like, no, you need to go in and I'm going to stay here and you're going to probably go in and die, but you need to stay alive as long as you can. I'm like, well, why? It's just trickling. I was like, yes, but in order to trickle this way, where you maximize survival, you come in on different sides of the point, you're able to contest and prevent the enemy from capping longer, even though you're not physically on the point or killing them off the point to make sure they can't come in. You're basically denying them the ability to capture point while at the same time also getting your own percentage up. And if you do this properly, you can go from 65% to 85% very, very easily, if not higher. And you actually will see, I think, Andres, we talked about this specific thing on Hanamura and being one of the big keys for success in how South Korea defended against United States with Diva and Winston,
Yeah,
where they were
absolutely.
trading on and off the point in order to trickle in without dying, maximizing survival, going in and out, not trying to win the fight, but trying to maximize, not on a Koth map, but on a control point, how much time they would actually take off the clock. So you can do this in any
Yeah.
game mode.
And the thing about this is that it's a weird concept, right? Because
Yeah.
your instinct tells you, stop trickling in, we're losing the fight. And as long as we keep trickling in, we won't be able to pick up our momentum and take it back from it unless one of our players clutches it out and for some reason gets like a quadruple kill by himself. But the chances of that happening when it's a single person going up against a team of like 4 or 5, sometimes even 6, are almost zero, right? Like unless the other team really screws over. Yeah, exactly. Because you're like some Sinatra level kind of guy.
No.
But the reality of the situation is that you are winning the game. If you're in a Koth map, you have control of the point. Even if you're losing the fight, you're winning the war, if that makes sense. The timer is running on your favor. So even though you're not being able to regain the point, the enemy team is all there. As long as you keep trickling in, you are still winning the game. So it's a really weird concept. And it doesn't mean like, oh, you should trickle it in every time. Like that's not ideal, right? Like ideally you want to win the fight every time and just hold the point. But sometimes this is not possible, right? Like sometimes the enemy team all get their ultimates and wipe half of your team or almost everybody in your team, and there's only like 2 of you left. Maybe the chances of you escaping are rather low, but you guys can able to maybe stall the point long enough. And as long as you're doing this, you're still winning the game. And there's a few reasons why you might want to do this, right? If you're holding the point, the longer you can hold it, the higher your chances of winning the entire round are going to be. Even if they eventually stop the trickle and gain the point, if you end up at, let's say, 80% percentage or 60%, then you just have to capture it once, and the time that you need to be there is going to be a lot shorter. Well, the enemy team is gonna be on the back foot at those points. I can't remember who did the analytics, but it was a long time ago when the game first came out, and this still holds true to now. But the first team to cap the point has a really big advantage in Koth over the other one, just by the way, like the even flow of the match works, right? Like you have ultimates coming and going, and those cycle of ultimates tend to favor the team that first got the point. So knowing these facts, trickling in certain situations just to hold a point is very valid. But you just have to keep in mind the reasoning behind them, right? Not just mindlessly trickle in for no reason. But in this case,
you'll
it
even
would be
see.
specifically because you're winning.
Yeah, and to build on that and kind of close this section of the email, when you go into cap specifically on Koth, the point of trickling is also just to give you a little bit more of wiggle room when you're towards the end of the percentage points, not just at any point, right? Like towards the end when you're trying to get your thing up to 99, because at that point, if you're like 90 percentile and you wipe the team really quickly, the enemy team really quickly in cap, what happens then is that only gives them a very, very short window in which they have to get from spawn to the point to even touch it, and then they have to fight it. So the goal is to not just trickle, but try to get the enemy team in a position where there's a gap in time that they have to travel from point A spawn to the point B of capture. And that's inevitably going to be there. But if you can basically spread out your team deaths once you go, you're in a fight where it's 4v6, you kind of just run off point, stay off there, try to survive, let somebody contest, and make sure you're just doing that. Then you can kind of endlessly contest for like 10, 25%. A lot of the times you can abuse it, especially if you have heroes like Mei and Lucio and Pharah and Tracer and Genji, where they have super mobility. Even Moira right now can relatively do it decently, and Winston and Diva. So
Yeah, absolutely.
let's get on to the next one, shall we?
Let's do it. Great point too, Neil. Um, point number 2 is uh, do, 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 do.
Good versus bad trading.
Oh, I thought I was reading the same one. Good versus bad trading kills on 2 CP maps. This is not so cut and dried, but if your opponent has a longer spawn distance than you, then trading kills can be worthwhile. Value targets can make a big difference, of course. If so, this feels like it's more of a detailed discussion. And I totally agree. There are certain situations where you dying in order to secure a certain kill can be worthwhile and not completely detrimental to your team. These things include things, for example, like Mercy, especially before the changes, but it still holds true nowadays, especially if she's holding a Valkyrie. Sometimes, as a Genji, for example, it might be worthwhile for you to go in and kill the Mercy, especially if you're in attack, for example, and get rid of her. And even if you die, you've at least denied the a whole enemy team of Mercy's ultimate for a long time. So there's like a huge window of opportunity. Maybe your Mercy's still up, so you might still be able to come back and keep the things going. But you've secured like a very valuable kill. This holds true for anyone that has their ultimate. If you're able to trade one of your deaths for somebody that has an ultimate, you might make it worthwhile for your team because then that person wasn't able to come back to the point and capitalize on it, even though you traded.
Oh, sorry, I'm just.
No, go
I
for
was
it.
gonna say, or if you can even swap into the position where you're ahead, right, on kills, and you're the DPS player, especially if you're the DPS player, and you've killed a target, and you're going in, you're like, well, I can get in a super risky position where I'm likely gonna die, and I can definitely confirm this kill, or I can play safe and just try to fight 5v6, right? Trading that kill a lot of times is the right call, especially when you're on attack. But on defense, your life is much more of an advantage when you're in the ideal position of second point defense, right?
Yeah,
And
and
on attack on first point, right? So if you're attacking A, then you've got spawn advantage. Where if you're defending B, then you have the spawn advantage on the defensive team. So
for
you have to
sure.
frame how you trade kills differently.
And like that's the beauty of this, and that's why he frames it as recognizing good versus bad trading, because there are situations like the one that you mentioned. If you're in defense and you just traded a 1-for-1 for an attacker, that's not an
It's
even
terrible.
trade. That it's a disadvantage to you. Like you said, the attackers have a shorter spawn or run time back to like where the point is. So you've basically put your team at a disadvantage there. Your life is a lot more valuable when you're on a defensive position than when you're in an attacking position. And likewise, when you're attacking, not every time you want to go in and get yourself killed just for one kill. Sometimes that's just not enough, right? If your team is trying to push through the point and you just killed like a random Torbjorn, and even worse, maybe they even have a teleporter. This sounds like a nightmare already for going into Hanamura versus Torbjorn and Symmetra. But
And
like
an Orisa. Oh, man.
for example, at that point, that's not a good trade either. If you're just going as Genji, killing a Torbjorn, and they have a teleporter, like you've basically just spent 30 seconds of the clock for your team to be able to like go in and capitalize on it. So definitely very nuanced. It depends on the situation you're in. But let's say there's like a 4 versus 3 and they have a Mercy, and you're like, listen, this Mercy needs to die or this might become a 5v6 real quick. Then at that point, yeah, it might be worth it for you to just go in, get a kill on the Mercy, and let their Junkrat kill you with his mine or whatever. But like, hey, that Mercy is gone. Now it's a 3v3, no Mercy kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a couple other situations where you can put yourself in a position where you're not necessarily going to die, but be in a very unfavorable slot in order to force a ultimate or force someone else out of position. And this is something that I didn't really even notice was more of a thing in Overwatch until I started playing Destiny. And I did a lot of Iron Banner, which is like their Crucible, both of those things, which is their PvP structure.
Mm-hmm.
And the game in Destiny is a lot more floaty and a lot less responsive in how your movements are controlled.
Oh yeah.
And so positioning can be punished much more efficiently and quicker because the shots are way faster than where people are able to move. Whereas in Overwatch, you can kind of jump or blink in and out, and it's a lot harder to track people. And so the reason I bring this up is because, like, if you're going into an unfavorable slot, you can kind of get so and so to like a soldier or a widow or somebody else to peek just for a quick moment, and you where you know where that person is, and your team can just team fire them and kill them instantly. This is something that's a lot harder to do unless you're playing a support like Zenyatta or Ana, and or you're playing someone like Diva Winston, who has the high mobility or the ability to peek at range. Because I know that there's stuff where I'll put myself in an unfavorable position to bait the Widow to try to shoot at me, and I've got a fully charged right click where I'm ducking, like come into play just so they see you, and then duck instantly and drop 5 shots into the face of the Widowmaker, and you get a free pick because you did something really risky and it paid off. But you have to be very good in mastery of your particular class. I know Andres has done this numerous times in the McCree versus Tracer matchup, where he's confident enough that he's going to land the flashbang, and has played against Tracers enough to know when they're going to blink and where they're going to go.
Yeah, it's all about picking those battles. But yeah, great point too. You want to move on to the last one?
Yeah, I'll read the last one here. Second fight is as a losing team. So if you lose a fight, you probably have an ultimate disadvantage. On Koth, this might mean that it's a good idea to call for no ultimates to be used on the second fight to set up to win on the third fight. But on Payload, this might mean that you should take an early fight even before you have the whole team, just to get some of your ultimate charges out of it, or get some ults out of it. How am I reading this weird? Hang on. On Payload, this might mean you should take an early fight even before you have the whole team to get some ults out if you can convince the team to group up to win the third fight. I'm not really sure about this strategy, but I'd love to hear more. So I think, at least for the Koth one, I understand what he's trying to get at here. It's basically saying what we refer to as a dry push, right? You go in, you push, you try to cap the thing, you don't use any ults, you get all your ult charges ready to go, and then maybe bait out 1 or 2 of the enemy ults, and then you have ult economy for the next fight. And then you can flip the point on Koth, right?
Yeah. This one sounds like an interesting one. I'm not so sure about this one. I think this one is more of a solo player strategy, maybe kind of thing. When you're joining the solo queue and you can't really coordinate with your entire team. And I've done this before. Like, let's say my Zarya announced in chat that she has 90% graviton, and I'm playing Tracer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I just use my pulse bomb or something, and I'm at like 20-30% pulse bomb. Normally, because I'm solo queuing, sometimes you don't have the flexibility like to coordinate as much. Like, you know that sometimes you can't trust your Zarya to just hold on to her graviton. Sometimes they just kind of do. You know what I mean? If they see
do it.
Yeah, they see opportunity, they just like do it out. But I know that she's like really going to have that graviton really soon. So I might try to play a little bit riskier to try to build my pulse bomb as fast as possible. With Tracer, you can actually sometimes get away with it since you have like all the blinks, the backtrack, like all the tools to basically, if you mess up, kind of like redo kind of thing. So I might try to like go ahead of my team, try to pick those fights. Even if I die ahead of the team, if it's like a payload map like Numbani and stuff, I've sometimes bought enough time, like the enemy team has had to like retreat a little bit. So I've bought enough time so that if I die, I can just rejoin my team real quick, maybe at like 80% charge. So that now I'm a little closer to that Zarya, for example. So it might cost me a death. It might look bad on paper. Like if you're just looking at the kill feed, it's like, oh, this Tracer just like went in and died on enemy lines. And sure, I did go in and I died, but they maybe got like 16% ult out of me, like the McCree that killed me. And I got like 50% ult from like spamming on their Zarya
You're
or
just laying
Roadhog
into them.
or whoever was there. You know what I mean? And it was all in preparation
Right.
for that fight. So I've
The
done
team
that.
wipe.
I've done that before. I don't know if that is exactly what he's kind of like referring to. He talks about the example of Koth, where you might want to hold on to your ults in the second fight as well. And it all really depends. Can you read your team? Can you read what they're trying to do? Can you keep up with the ultimates and which ultimates you should coordinate with each other, and then play your game around those things rather than just like blindly going in the here for no reason, making those deaths count for a particular reason, you know?
Yeah, the higher you get in ranked play, especially when you get into upper echelons of Diamond and Masters and Grandmasters, you're going to see this on the streams. You know, the streamers are going to be doing this. And then especially within professional matches where you hear, Hex and ZP and Monty and Doa talking about this from an ult economy point of view. I know we've mentioned this way back where we did like the economy of ultimates, but it's always good to kind of re-institute after talking and focusing on individual heroes, because the economy of what's going on is better than your currency of loot boxes in Overwatch, because it dictates if you can win the game or not. A lot of the times is, do you have a final point in which you need to flip the cap on a Koth map? Do you need to push the payload that much more a little bit to cap the point? Or do you need to, capture the point in Hanum or on point 2 before the enemy team did? In order to do these things, you need to be ahead on the ultimate economy. So a lot of times you're going to see like professional games like the Overwatch World Cup where, their team is going in and they're only using one ultimate. Like Jake will burn his soldier ultimate because he gets it really soon. And then they go in, and if the enemy team responds with a Zenyatta ultimate. So depending on how the rest of the fight pans out, one team comes out on top, the other comes out on bottom, but only one ultimate on both teams is gone even. So essentially, that's a defensive win because nothing happened for the offense, even though the ults went even. So the important thing is that the next fight, the teams are still even on the ultimate economy, given all of the factors have remained static. So the ultimate economy is then going to be something where if you're burning 2 ultimates and they're burning 1 and you win the fight and you're on offense, it's not that as big of a deal. You want to be in the pilot seat when you're defending and you have more ultimates at your disposal in order to activate them in response and reactive ults. Because the proactive ults are better on offense and the defensive ones are obviously better on defense, ironically enough, right? So
One last thing I want to say about this point is that it does make a fair point that, let's say you lose the first fight in almost any map. At that point, you can count yourself to be at an ultimate disadvantage. And I think that this is something that, especially at the lower ranks, people are not really thinking about yet. And even at the higher ranks, it takes a minute for people to like really start considering this. And especially if you're just solo queuing as a team, it's hard to coordinate all of this. But once you're at an ultimate disadvantage, you do have to play the game a little bit differently. He mentioned certain ways you can adapt, like calling for no ultimates on the second fight. So maybe on the third fight, you can all come in with a multitude of ultimates. And these are all valid strategies. You just have to keep in mind that you're playing on the back foot ultimate-wise at that point after you've lost the first fight. So certain things like, for example, Dragon Blade. A good Genji could get a Dragon Blade real fast and then go kill the enemy Zenyatta and Mercy, no problem. If they lost the first fight, though, chances are that by the time they get that Dragon Blade, either Mercy might have her ultimate or Zenyatta might have his Transcendence. So at this point, you have to think about the game a little bit differently. Should you just use that Dragon Blade to bait out the Transcendence, for example? And then hopefully in next fight, your Zarya will have a Graviton, but you know the Transcendence is out of the way at that point. And your ultimate as Genji is a little more disposable, right? Like you rather use the blade to force the Zenyatta to pop the Transcendence than the Graviton, which is going to take a really long time to reload back. At least longer than the Genji ult if things are going appropriately.
Right.
So you might have start thinking about these things. Not maybe not always saving everything at the same time, because if you never force that transcendence, then you might graviton and blade at the same time. But guess what? The Zenyatta still has the transcendence. He just pops it in and he neglects all of that damage, neutralizing 2 ults with 1 rather than just trading 1 for 1 ult. So I don't know if this kind of like helps too, but I think it alludes to that point that you're trying to make as well.
He says,
All
in
right.
closing, I really think the content is key for keeping the community strong. As the game adds more heroes and maps, I think it's the biggest threat for the long-term health of the game is how we are on board as new players. So the
How we
concept
onboard
of
new players.
Right.
And I love this part because he keeps in mind the new guys, and it's very true, right?
Yeah.
As newer people join the game,
Right.
some of these concepts are gonna be already ingrained in our heads. Like, we've been playing this game for about a year, so we understand these things because we played so many games, and we know why these things would be good, even though they might seem bad to maybe a new player. And a new player might not do them because it seems like a terrible idea. Well, in reality, it's a good idea. But I love it, and like, we have some of our own situations that we've learned. We're going to touch on them a little bit next, but I would love to hear some other situations that other members of the community have. You guys want to write in and let us know what's been that eureka moment, that aha, I've been doing this wrong the whole time, or maybe things that didn't seem right at first, but then as you played the game more, you were like, maybe it is right to do it in certain situations, kind of thing. I would love to hear from you guys that.
For sure. We are planning on doing an episode at the end of season 7, which we haven't done in a while, which is basically a season 7 what I learned. It's something that I wish we would have kept up on at the end of every season, where we kind of do this with the community. You guys can email, you can Discord chat us, you can DM us directly, and we'll compile a bunch of it and just read off for the whole show what you guys are learning, because if you're learning it, then the other community can benefit from that. And whether you're bronze or masters, if you're learning something, it's a good idea. And won't be a point where we'll take anybody's like advice of this is what you should do. It's more of like what I learned to do, that it's helped me like climb or something like that. That's what we're going for. But Andres wanted to talk about something called hero framing as the main topic here, in concordance with this email, because a lot of this is going to affect that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this email kind of inspired me to give my own thing that I've learned over time. And I've learned many things over time, but this is the one that I've been thinking about recently. And kind of like the one that's been like on my head, that I'm finally being kind of like really internalizing this concept. What I'm talking about here is the concept of framing. And this might have a different name. Honestly, I don't know. If you guys know, hit me up. Let me know. Somebody might have come up with a concept for this in first-person shooters, because they've been around for a really long time. But what I mean by framing is how you position your first-person view, right? How are you looking at the scenery, at the battle, at the fight? Who are you paying attention? And your ability to hold the camera in certain angles or change the camera to a different angle while being efficient, being steady, and keeping kind of like things framed the right way. Like I said, I don't know if there's a better name for it, but that's kind of like the name I came up for it. So we're going to roll with it for now. It's a very important concept, and it's taken me a while to kind of like get there, and more than like get there, because eventually you kind of like start getting these things with muscle memory, but just like thinking about it. Because if you see the pros, they are really good at one thing, and that is controlling their mouse to aim at the right places at the right time in the least amount of time possible. So you'll sometimes look at them do like a 180 turn, and it's almost seamless, right? Like they're looking straight, then they're looking back in like a matter of seconds, and their camera is very steady, very even. It's not jittery all over the place. Sometimes if you spectate a newer player, especially one that is maybe playing with a really high sensitivity, for example, you can see that camera just jiggle and jitter all over the place, to the point where it just makes it harder on you to keep up with what's going on the screen. as we know, we talked about it before in the show, Overwatch is a game of information. The more information you can soak in at one time, and more than that, the more appropriate information, right? Because every hero is going to have to be focusing on different parts of the battle and doing different roles. The stuff that you have to focus on varies from hero to hero. So it's very important that you have a good mastery of framing the action that you need to be looking at the time. Let's go into a few examples because all of this sounds a little bit abstract when I'm just kind of like mentioning it like this. Let's start with Widowmaker. I think good Widowmakers are a great example of good framing. An amateur Widowmaker most of the time will trace players with their sights. As the player rocks back and forth, maybe they're doing the strafe to avoid getting shot. A newer Widowmaker will kind of strafe with them as they're like moving, right? Like trying to chase the head almost. Like if the character moves right, the player will chase right, and so on and back and forth. And this actually makes it really hard for you to shoot because one, probably the player is moving in a somewhat unpredictable pattern. Like you don't exactly know when he's going to turn right, when he's going to turn left. And the more that you're chasing him, the more erratic your movement becomes, and the harder it becomes for you to make accurate movements or accurate predictions of where people are going to go. When you start looking at seasoned Widowmakers, especially those in the competitive scene, you realize that they keep their camera very steady and they're usually just aiming at a particular point where their target is more likely to be or to go. And once their target appears on the screen or moves close to their sights, or they just feel at a point where the movement is predictable enough for them, they'll quickly move the mouse to that position, la flick, you might call it, and snipe the person. But that is so much easier to do because you've practiced your muscle memory, you're used to your sensitivity. So the only thing you need to do is one smooth movement, whether it be diagonal or up or down or wherever it is. But you have an anchor point, and then your shots start becoming a lot more reliable. And you're not so erratic. You're able to soak the information that you need. And if you look at guys like Flower, for example, he does this all the time. He'll grapple to a place, aim in the direction that he knows their target generally are going to be. And when he aims there, he surveys the scenery for a second. He's like, where is everyone? Then with a quick swoop movement, goes to the head, snipes. And it's all perfect framing, very smooth, very fast, obviously, but very smooth. What do you think about this, Rob? Is this all making sense over here?
I think it is making a lot of sense because when you're doing framing, when you're trying to set up where your hero is positioned, a lot of the times you, in a solo queue environment, aren't really aware of not rather like where you should be, but rather like where you want to go. You know what I mean? You kind of like, you typically don't know where you should be until you have all the information. And so framing, what this does, if you do it properly, is that generally speaking, in a game like this where you don't have radar and you don't always have all the information, you are relying on your ears, you're relying on the what you can see.
Yeah.
You need to frame your body and your character model where you can see the most things in the least risky way.
Mm-hmm.
And also in the right position given what your hero can do with its given kit, like Mercy jumping, Winston jumping, Tracer blinking, Genji dashing, Hanzo wall climbing, Widowmaker grapple hook, and Zenyatta floating. Right, like depending on what you can do should dictate where you go. Right, so I mean, like for me, I'll just mention something that I've kind of learned here, and maybe this is what you're going for, Andres. You can feel free to correct it, but my Zenyatta play took a very hard right turn in the correct direction when I stopped trying to get in the face of landing shots. I got coached a little while ago on Zenyatta, and I was getting coached after I thought I was doing really well. And he said that you can frag He's like, I don't know why um when you have such a strong ability to frag that you feel obligated to get in the middle of the fight. Zenyatta can frag at any range because you have no damage fall off. And if you're not abusing that, you're not playing the hero properly. And so what that means is Zenyatta, even though he has crazy good shots and the projectiles are a lot easier to hit when you're closer because you're not timing, you're not worried about trying to hit somebody because you're not a hit scan. You have to worry about leading your shots a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
You need to frame your actual physical model in a position in the very far back, but not too far back where like tracers and Genjis can just dash on you and kill you. So you
Yeah.
need to be in the furthest position where your team can A, help you, and B, you can see everything that's going on, whether you're defending or attacking, without getting shot. And I got lectured in this live thing because he's like, if you peek that Widow one more time, I'm going to lose my mind in this VOD. Just wanted you to know. Like something like that. Because what happens is it's building good habits versus doing something you can do at a rank. So when I'm playing a Platinum as Zenyatta and I'm peeking a Widow with a right click, it may be something that's totally fine to do because I can just frag them out every time, right? But if you're disciplining in order to make good habits to climb, that is never a situation you want to put yourself in as Zenyatta.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you peek a Widow, you're dead. Because a good Widow, a decent Widow at the rank you're trying to get to will always punish you. There is no questions.
Absolutely.
So
And
the hero framing is going to dictate a lot of like successful moments changing to safe moments and correct moments that will take a lot more time in order to pay off with your rank gains, if that makes sense.
yeah. And I love your example, and I'm gonna touch on it in 1 second too. I'm just want to
Sure.
give the last example on this framing thing, because there are many. Honestly, with every hero, there are good framing habits, whether it be Tracer or Soldier or Winston, or Zarya. Actually, let's talk about Zarya because Zarya is a good one. She's
Sure.
a very important hero to frame the right way because with Zarya, you hopefully want to be not only in a position, but you want to be looking at the right things at the right time because you have a very useful tool, your shield, which can literally clutch out the most amazing situations. Like that little 2-second shield can be the difference between winning a fight or losing the fight. If you're able to be looking at the right places at the right time, if you have a good frame with a hero, you're looking in a way that you can keep track of your team and maybe the enemy team, so you can see things like hooks or maybe a Genji or Winston diving on your Zenyatta, or maybe your Pharah is flanking them and is about to do her ultimate on top and is about to rain from above. If you're able to keep track of these things and your position is good, your shields will be very, very timely, and it will clutch out situations. Like that Pharah might be able to just get a quadruple kill and get out of there alive because you threw the shield on her. Or that Zenyatta might be able to survive the Winston jump because the Winston just didn't have enough time to finish off the Zenyatta thanks to your shield. But this does require you to be looking at the right places. If you're with Zarya and you're heading first into the battle, just like nuking people and tracing them, and your entire team is behind and you have no visuals on them, then you will never be able to clutch out those shields. You know what I mean? You'll just be focused on yourself and the enemy team.
Right.
If you, on the other hand, you position yourself a little better, where maybe you're lobbing bombs, if they come too near, then that's when you start tracking them to kind of like keep him at bay. And at the same time, you're kind of like keeping track of your surroundings, your heroes, your allied heroes near you. Then you'll be doing a really efficient job as Zarya. Your defense will feel really strong, kind of impenetrable, because every time they try to do a dive, you're just there pushing them back and protecting your allies. You're gonna be doing a lot more with a hero. Now back to your example though, what you were talking about with Zenyatta, I think that's a really important realization too, and I would call that utilizing your optimal range. Every hero has an optimal range, a distance they want to be off of the enemies to like really shine. And I think that happened to me with Soldier when I was practicing Soldier a lot. I really started realizing that if I kept my range, even if it was like far away, because Soldier has a really nice optimal range, the characters would be harder to hit, right? Like the models would be really small because I'm so far away. But I realized that my damage was still quite effective and lethal, but their damage against me was almost negligible unless you're playing against a Widowmaker or other people that have like a really long range, like an Anna, for example. But even against Anna, if she's dueling you, she's probably not doing something more important on her side, and you usually can
She's not
withstand.
healing.
Exactly, you usually can withstand an Anna, no problem. She has to shoot you like 4 times, well, 3 times now, and you have a biotic field. So honestly, that
What?
fight is in your is that fight is in your favor, kind of like relatively, because you can still damage Anna from your distance quite well. If it's just there shooting at you, you can win that fight. So
Oh,
after
for sure.
playing with Soldier for a while and like being able to realize like, oh man, the optimal range of this guy is actually really large. If I always keep my distance, I can even see when people try to dive me and then readjust. Just like keep running back and then I'm back at my optimal range way back there. And it makes it really, really hard for people to get to you and kill you. So eventually I started like, wow, I'm like dishing a ton of damage. I'm still getting kills and I'm almost unkillable from this
And you're
range back here.
safe.
Yeah,
You're not
exactly.
dying.
Exactly. So same concept with Zenyatta, finding his optimal range, realizing that his orbs have no fall off damage. You deal the same damage that you deal if they were like right in front of you. And that is really powerful, right? Once you get used to firing at a long range, and you get comfortable with that, you start learning how to aim. You start realizing, oh, if I'm aiming at a really long distance, I only need to do like a microscopic adjustment if they're going like right or left, because that will make a
Mm-hmm.
huge difference in like the distance. Well, if they're like right in front of you, your adjustments are much broader, right? Because you're moving from side to side, maybe sometimes 180 turns. But once you start making those mental adjustments, you start getting good at shooting long range, and you're like, oh wow, this guy is just amazing at this range.
Now, Andres, I'm not sure if this affects the like the framing in and of itself as far as like positioning and like what you're viewing, but I feel like how you react to it kind of does overlap a little bit with how you use weapons in the game.
Hmm.
And what I mean, without being vague, is how to utilize people's kits that have the ability to automatically fire rounds one after another by holding down a key, or by spending more ammo with Zenyatta for holding down the right click to charge a 5-shot or 4-shot, right?
Hmm.
And the difference between this comes up so much because I play supports, but it's honestly, it could do with anything, because Soldier has an automatic rifle, right? You hold down the trigger, it shoots as long as you hold it down until you run out of ammo.
Hmm.
Bastion has the same thing. So who are the other ones? We got Mercy, Bastion, Soldier 76, Tracer, Sombra, Zenyatta, Lucio. Even though it's in bursts, it still keeps firing if you keep the trigger down.
Widow, regular fire, I guess, like not the zoomed in.
Widow's primary without the scope. I think there's a few more,
I mean,
but I think this is a good
Torb.
idea of just mixing it up. Yeah, Torb, right click and left click are both that way, and Reaper. And McCree, they have a cadence to everything that they space it out, and if you keep down the key, and some of them will be automatic.
Yeah.
But when you're using this in a framing discussion, something that I've found on literally every clip of a hero being played is that when you want to improve in that hero, clicking and holding down the weapon fire is never how you want to play, with the exception of Mercy. I think that Mercy's like only way to defend and to put pressure out when she's being threatened 1v1 is just to keep the clicker going and the pistol firing. Because it's gotta contest somebody when they're coming at you and try to land those projectile shots. And maybe
Yeah.
Baby Diva. But
To
you know what
me,
I mean?
yeah, to me it's very it's situational, but it leans more towards never holding the click down. I don't advise just holding the click down mindlessly and like tracing people, or just trying to like keep up with people as you hold it down, because you actually miss a lot of bullets this way. And more detrimentally than missing the bullets is you run out of ammo really fast. You have to basically reload a lot more than if you were not holding the click down. I am more of a fan of doing conscious shots. So with Soldier, for example, I'm more of a fan of like, as I'm tracing them, when I see the cursor is right on top of them, I'll fire. If they're moving like super erratically and I can see that my cursor is not on top of them, I try to stop, and I try to just like do it in bursts, right? Like I'm usually trying to keep up with their head and just doing like a pa 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 pa, kind of like that pattern, like
4 to
three.
5 shots. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say more like 3 to 4 shots, kind of thing.
Okay.
And this way, you ensure two things: your shots are landing more often than they're missing, and your clip lasts a lot longer. And this comes really in handy once you start like climbing the ranks, because there is nothing worse than running out of your clip in a very like high risk situation, right? Like if you're dueling that Genji, if you're dueling that Tracer or whatever it is, if you run out of ammo and you have to reload, that is the moment that they will kill you. You know what I mean? They'll dive you, they'll unload the Tracer clip on you, they'll get really close to you and destroy you. So yeah, you want to conserve that clip as long as you can. Like I see some newer players fighting against Genji, and the Genji starts deflecting, and instead of stopping shooting, they just start like shooting to the side or something. And it's like, well, now when the Genji is out of his deflect, you're gonna have no ammo whatsoever. So you're basically just lost your window of opportunity to kill him right there. Um, and this
Yeah, we
goes
could
for
probably
all the heroes.
I was gonna say we could probably bring this back into the framing. Like, how does this overlap with framing for you, Andres? Like when you're thinking about how you're firing your weapons in the view that you can see. Like, where are you firing, right?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm usually trying to trace them, and as I see my cursor physically go through them, I will fire, kind of thing. If it's with Soldier, I'll be trying to like track him, kind of thing. How I track him really depends on the hero themselves. To give you an example, there's like different styles of dodging, but like some people will be really fast with their AD strafing, right? Like they'll be moving left and right really fast. But because they're moving left and right so fast, they're making like almost like tiny little movements. The left and right is not very broad, and it can be really confusing to people. Like when you're trying to shoot somebody who's moving left and right so fast, you're kind of like you start moving your mouse left and right really fast. But in those situations, what I've noticed is a little better if I just aim towards the middle of them, and instead of like moving my mouse left and right with them, I just kind of like leave my cursor center on them and just start like shooting at that. Maybe just
Pulse
like,
firing.
yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
just like slightly tilting my mouse left and right, not really tracking them, but just kind of like firing in that kind of like general direction. And more often than not, you deal a ton of damage to those people. So it can be like a little style. If the person is a little more broad with their strokes, with their like left and right, then I'll adjust that a little bit. Some people are really predictable. They just run in a straight line. Those are my favorite, because then you can just follow them, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that there's also the guys that'll like weave in the crouch, the AD spam with the crouch.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
reason that the crouch is a big deal is because everyone's always aiming for the head. So when you're aiming that high and you crouch, not only are you taking less damage, but you're avoiding it entirely.
I'm a fan of crouching, especially when you're playing against Widowmakers. The crouch can be super clutch against those widows, especially if it's a good widow that's almost aiming at your head. It just throws them off so much, and it feels great when you crouch and you just see the shot go by your head like.
The Widowmaker round just like whiz past you, and you stand up, and the ghost of the shells like still past you. You're like, yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are the best, especially when you're playing Zenyatta and like you're AD spamming. You're like, why can't I hit him? He's just floating. Those are the
But
best.
yeah, that was a really good discussion on like little situations and stuff that you've learned. I really like these little things. I think that these small little details, these eureka moments, as I like to call them, are what moves you forward in Overwatch. It takes a minute to realize, and I feel like some people take them for granted, right? Like you will mention these things to certain people, and they'll dismiss them right away. They'll be like, "Oh, yeah, that's obvious. That's really obvious." But like, have you really thought about that, right? Like, don't dismiss this little concept so fast, because that's what they makes a difference between a good and a bad player.
Yeah, and that's why we like to bring on people that put lots and lots of hours on a particular hero and is fresh in their mind of playing it frequently when we get them on the show. It's not necessarily that we're looking for, somebody that's really good at a bunch of heroes and can talk about one in particular, but rather one that they like playing a lot and they can min-max them in a lot of ways that you may not be thinking, even as a Diamond Masters player. So moving forward, after this hero guides are kind of recapped, we'd like to keep revisiting the ones like we said before, but like we want to get more general, just good GM players in here to talk about stuff like this, where we can, frame up our shots and how we want to progress as a team here, and ult economy, and how do you proficiently trickle, you know what I mean? Like, how do you go in with dry pushes, and how do you try to make yourself available as a support, or how do you get to the point in solo queue where when you engage, your team responds? You know what I mean? Like, you're not just the Winston diving in, dropping your bubble and dying, and now it's a 5v6 and your team's sitting at the choke still. Like those situations where they do happen, and it's really difficult because you've got to sometimes play and engage as a tank or disengage as a support or a DPS, and do it completely differently in some skill brackets because of how the teammates are on average going to respond rather than not. Because I know for me, in some of my gold and plat games, I'll have players that are just like, where the fight is now one, it's a 2 or 3v5, and then my soldier on my team blows his ultimate. You're like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And this is something that's like, this is what I would expect from, a lower skill tier player to be doing, because they just don't know better. They just want to confirm kills. They just think it's a good idea. They don't understand the whole scope of ultimate economy and making sure you have it for the next fight, or et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I think there's a lot of things that Andres and I can even learn. Andres, you
For
going
sure.
to Diamond and Masters, getting all these folks in GM, even the GM folks I talk to are like talking about the nuances of learning not just heroes and what they're capable of at the top level, but then you start getting to know, like, how does this guy play Tracer in his particular style? Because something that Andres and I talked about, like, very briefly at BlizzCon, was the difference in style between Korea's, I can never say his name, Korea's Tracer player and
Sabiobi?
Sinatra. Oh yeah, Sabiobi or something like that.
Yeah, Sabiobi. I don't know how you pronounce it, but that's how you spell it.
Sabe. Saeb was the start of his name, but yeah, Sabe and Sinatra are just going at it. Those guys have very different Tracer styles, and also some of their styles are going to be informed by the team they currently play with. Because I guarantee you, day one, when you see Sabe playing in Overwatch League, he's going to be playing in a different way with his new roster. And the same goes for Sinatra with playing with San Francisco Shock. They've got to adjust their play to their team play.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to highlight some of those things in the future. And if you guys are looking for particular guests, we do like your suggestions, but it also helps if you can, help us out with scheduling, or help us out with putting those guys in our DMs, and so they know to come to us. But yeah,
Absolutely.
we got one more email here It's a little bit after the hour slot. Andre, do you want to push this to next week, or do you want to try to take
Yeah,
it?
let's just push it to next week. Let's not go too long because I know I'll talk your ear off about this.
Yeah, this is a show where it's kind of like a new can of worms. It could last 5 minutes. It could last a long time, but I think we want to give it a little bit more time. But Neil, you had a great email. Thank you so much for giving us this really great stuff to talk about this week. And Seth G, we will get to your Overwatch League question next week. I think that's going to close it for the show, yeah?
Yep.
So this week we don't have any new iTunes reviews, but it is one of the best ways to support the show, and I wanted to highlight two things about this. So in our iTunes reviews, we recently broke 200 iTunes reviews right before or right after. I'm not quite sure. But thank you guys so much. I wasn't quite aware of just how many of you guys were giving us iTunes reviews when you don't write something. We don't really see them. And so I need to be better about tracking when we do get more iTunes reviews of thanking you guys that are doing them, that aren't writing something and review, are like, well, it's just good. I don't have anything to say. I'm just going to give it, a review. So thank you so much for your iTunes reviews, guys. I know that they're coming in. We didn't get a new written one this week, but I know they're out there, and thank you so much for that. We do get them if you're international. So regardless if you're in Netherlands or South Africa or United States or Japan, it doesn't matter. We can get your review tracked, and it will get to us. So please send them in. It's the best way to support the show, to help us in search results, let other people know what we're about, and also to voice your feedback. And then we have Patreon. Patreon is the best way to support the show financially to make sure that we can make upgrades. Andres and I actually were talking in the pre-show about my interface, which is the connector piece between my microphone and my computer that needs to be replaced. And I have got to buy this thing soon for a replacement because there's this weird static thing that my microphone will do every once in a while at extended use. And Andres also has been trying to get on me about getting a compressor as soon as we can financially make it happen, because compressors make the audio sound that much better on his end and save him a lot of time in post. So these are things that are really, really good for us on Patreon to help us out. And we have some people at the top level and Diamond supporting us as official sponsors of the show. We have Chris DePlaya, Ginger Sasquatch, Good Apollo, Great Root Beer, Great Root Bear, Lysol Magic, Not Muad'Dib, Ricky Ticky, Sketchy Nonsense, Silverback, and Tragic Zach. And special shout out to Ricky Ticky for upping his pledge as a Diamond sponsor to even more. And I will not disclose how much he's giving us, but man, you are such a genuine person to do that to us. Like, I don't know what else to say, but thank you. We were pretty blown away to see how much he had changed his pledge to. We were talking, we're like, I don't know what else we can do for you. We kind of like put everything else out there that we have reasonable time and effort to do. And also to Silverback, who submitted yet another VOD review. We will get to it. We're still kind of getting Andres back on his feet from being sick, and we'll try to get you another VOD review headed your way.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Also,
for all the support. You guys are super awesome for keeping us going over here and supporting us. It's always super great to see support, and you guys are making this possible, right? Like, you and me have some pretty decent rigs for podcasting and creating all this content now, and this is all thanks to you guys. So keep it up, and thanks again. We will be eternally grateful for you guys giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, and also special thanks to Michael B, who is a new patron this month, and shout out to PvP Twitch, who is coming in the chat right now saying offline host for my dudes, wasn't streaming, crying face. So thanks for the host PvP, we really appreciate it. And speaking of Twitch, is a good transition. We are Twitch affiliates now, so we have one emote. It is the Overwatch Omnic Lab hype emote. I actually need to edit it because it doesn't look great with the dark theme. As I've come to realize on the black text doesn't really work on a dark gray, so I've got to do some sort of highlights and re-edit the emotes. But if you guys want to be a part of the hype squad for our Discord, our Twitch affiliate status, you can throw us a sub over there on twitch.com/OmnicLab as another way to support us. And a reminder, we do have merch. We have hoodies, we have t-shirts, we have coffee mugs. You guys can go find that on the website, omniclab.com/links. Thanks you guys so much for joining us on episode 79. We were scrambling a little bit this week for something fun, and this email was brilliant. So again, special thanks for Neil for not just giving us content, but also asking some great questions that I'm sure a lot of you out there can benefit from. Andres, why don't you let people know where they can find you?
Yeah, if you personally want to find me, look me up on Twitter at iPlayGames, and also find me on soundcloud.com/iPlayMusic.
If you guys want to find the show on Twitter, it's at Omnic Lab. You can find me at Not Rob on Twitter and Instagram. If you like Hearthstone, you can find my Hearthstone show. It's called Velen's Chosen Podcast. It's about teaching. It's about new card reviews. It's about all the cool things, and especially lore in Warcraft, but yet tied with Hearthstone cards. And then I have another side project called Concept Craft you can find on Libsyn. That's going to do it for the show, guys. It's been great. It's been fun. And we hope to see you guys next week. Remember, don't be a lab rat. Be a scientist. We'll see y'all next week.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us in the chat, guys. Appreciate it.
They'll like your sweater.